I'm going to do something different this week. I want to focus on 3 phrases from the scriptures. These 3 phrases popped out to me, and I think they beckon some exploration. And hopefully at the end of which I can tie it all together so that it makes sense with the gospel. All right, so Ethan's going to put the slide up on the TVs. 3 phrases, and you might see that they're out of order, but that's okay. That's just how my sermon flows. The first passage from Colossians, as you have received Jesus Christ the Lord, continue to live your lives in him, rooted and built up in him. The second phrase is from the Collect, the protector of all who trust in you. And from Luke, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived. Let's look at that first phrase from Colossians. When I was at Barry Hospital in Coos Bay, I worked on the mental health unit. And I was the liaison to the labor delivery unit. And it wasn't uncommon for me to be called down to minister to a mom or parents where the child was stillborn. And as much as that was hard to do and to be present with those families and those parents, part of me was able to make sense of that circumstance because I knew that infant was a child of God. In Colossians, we read, when you have received Jesus Christ the Lord, received, well, in religious denominations, we have rules. Rules where we can come in the Episcopal Church and be a member of the Episcopal Church through baptism, confirmation, and reception. And through that process, you are then also brought into the family of God and the family of the faithful. But regardless of whether or not you're baptized or not, whether or not you have joined a denomination or not, I believe that you are a child of God. So that's my first point that came from the passage from Colossians. The second point that comes from that same passage is the idea of being rooted and built up in him. In him meaning Jesus Christ living in our lives. Stacy and I are taking out shrubs to expand our rose garden in front of our home. Some of those shrubs' roots are big. And they are deeply, deeply rooted. And that's God being rooted in us. God takes hold of us, and he is going to be there no matter what. That's the rootedness that we read about in this passage from Colossians. That's my second point. First point, regardless of whether you're baptized or not, you are a child of God. And the second point, God takes hold of you. And we are rooted in him by our faith. From the Collect, he protects those who trust in you. Have you ever had that experience where you have felt the angels of God surround you in a circumstance? Yeah, I'm thinking of the many times when I have been late going to an appointment, and because of my lateness, even though I am so frustrated with myself, I'm humbled because I did not get into that vehicle accident that just took place if I would have been those few minutes further down the road. Is that fate? Is that God's divine intervention? I choose to believe that it's God's angels surrounding me in that moment. And I believe that that is God's angels surrounding you in that moment too. But there's other ways in which we can take steps to protect ourselves. I have a number of crosses, and it's almost as if that cross on that particular day and that particular moment chooses me. And I wear that cross. And it's also through prayer that we build ourselves up and protect ourselves. We read also in the New Testament from the book of the Ephesians about the armor of God. And in case you may not remember that passage, the armor of God are these: the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, shoes of peace. What a wonderful image. Shoes of peace. The shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit. We can pray that as we get ready each day. We can put on the armor of God. The God, our protector. Now, looking at the gospel, where we read about the neighbor coming to the neighbor asking for 3 loaves of bread because he has a visitor unexpectedly showing up on his doorstep. How many of you have gone to your neighbor's house because you're making chocolate chip cookies and you forgot to get eggs? And so your neighbor has graciously given you those 2 eggs to help make this recipe happen. Well, I had a similar situation when I moved back to Eugene from seminary. I lived in an apartment complex, and being new to the area, having not lived in Eugene, Oregon before, I asked my neighbor about the trash collection days and how that worked. And she gave me a wonderful answer, and I thanked her, and then she tagged on this: don't come looking for sugar either. A clear dig at me for don't bother me ever again. Right? We are to show mercy and kindness to all, even when there is rudeness and nastiness. We are to be hospitable. And that's the message from one section of the gospel today. But I believe, even though my neighbor didn't want me to bother her, I believe we are to bother our neighbors, because that's how we shine God's light out into the world and into our neighborhood and beyond. So how do we tie all of this together? In the gospel, we read of the Lord's Prayer. But there are other places where I can say we are given some guidelines, given a framework, given a rule of life, if you will, on how to live a Christian life. The first that comes to mind is from Exodus, the 10 Commandments. And then In the Gospels, we read of Jesus saying, love your neighbor. The great commandment of love. And in this gospel, he gives us the Lord's Prayer. And that's the framework that we can put together and use in our lives to be in a life of Christ. To have that deep relationship with God. The God with whom we are deeply rooted, the God with whom we have protection, and the God who wants us to be hospitable. So I challenge you this next week to ask God for protection and embody God's protection. Ask God for love and embody God's love for others. Ask God for guidance in the life of Christ, and then embody God's guidance using that framework of the Ten Commandments, love thy neighbor, and the Lord's Prayer. And I challenge you in this next week to ask, and it will be given to you. Amen.